A great question. First of all, thanks for doing this. It's as we kind of talked about offline there. It's been a heck of a journey thus far, Mr. Paul. I think we met officially in 2012, unofficially in 2011. So been some time. But yeah, just to maybe kind of touch on kind of what I'm doing now with ProOps Consulting, and then we can easily get into the history and kind of how we got here. But yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, ProOps Consulting is a media operations consultancy / advisory, to be fair. And what we're focused on today, at the very least, is the operations workflow and processes in the digital media industry. And I don't think I, emphasized this enough in my LinkedIn post as of late. The operations teams are really the backbone of this space, and it's like, you can do all the talking you want, but then someone's actually got to do the work. And so I feel like there's an opportunity here to support and drive some of that kind of operations excellence that we all want to see and know we need. And so that's really kind of what we're up to now. In terms of how we got here, we're not going to go too far back, so I'll spare the listeners of the 2011 through 2024 flow. But most recently, I was at a retail media network here in Canada. We did a lot of work around starting from scratch and then really building out that kind of workflow and process standpoint, integrating an OMS, building out our teams. And I keep saying our, because when you're working in that environment, you got a ton of people who are kind of involved. You got a number of business stakeholders. You got a number of operations teams as well. And so for the past 3 years, we've really been focused on kind of streamlining all of that effort, all of that work. So starting from a very manual place and then ending up in a lot more of an automated, like efficient flow to run campaigns at the very least. And whether that's as a retail media network, you're running campaigns on behalf of your own brands or third-party CPG. So that was a bit of a mouthful, but that's kind of where we're at. That started when I moved from the sell side. So I was at a publisher for, as you know, for almost a decade. Then moving to the buy side, it was fairly eye-opening to see kind of obviously both sides of this industry, but really, like, if I were to kind of pin the two kind of real opportunities and why I started ProOps Consulting, I feel like there's a knowledge gap in the operations space. And that's not, to fault anyone else, but there's very few of us in this space who've been kind of involved in ad operations or media buying for, 15, 17 plus years, who really understand that end-to-end flow that I mentioned before. And when I say end-to-end operations flow, I really mean pre-sales, all those steps that happen in pre-sales, through delivery, through invoicing. And I don't think I could probably understate this too much, but it's one of those things where you have to have that kind of overall view, that end-to-end view, before you can really start impacting and supporting a business. So that was one area. So that knowledge gap that seems to be growing in this space. We got a lot of folks coming in who are very specialized in one thing, and very few people who are more generalists who understand kind of all of it. The other one is, as you know, and I'm sure everyone in this space is seeing, is the growth of retail media is skyrocketing. And that has been a trend for the last couple of years. But when I jumped in probably just over 3 years ago now, it was just in the early stages. And what we've noticed is any major retailer globally who didn't step in back in 2022, 2023, whatever it was, are now deciding to jump into this space, and they're having a difficult time understanding where they start. Not only that, but they almost immediately want to go from start to growth. And so underpinning all of that, as you know, and is in my wheelhouse, is the operations side. So there's a real need for folks who've been there, done that, and in a part of this industry that is so new, it's hard to find those folks. So there was an opportunity there to help guide and advise on where to start, what to do, and then how to set yourself up for that kind of very quick growth that we're seeing everywhere. The other thing too is that I was very focused on the Canadian market, and retail media is a global trend. So there are opportunities everywhere in my eyes. And so I'm literally, as you can attest, talking to everyone, anywhere. And there seems to be so much going on in this space, and I missed that part of it when I was sat at a retailer. I missed kind of interacting with the wider industry. So there you go. Yeah, I'd say number one are some of the folks I've been fortunate enough to work with. And that runs the gamut from a close mutual friend of both of ours, Mr. Mark Lister, through to the teams that I've been able to support, whether it was on the Kijiji kind of eBay side for those years, or most recently at the Retail Media Network. Just being able to work with folks who really get this space, who come in and want to get things done on a daily basis, and who push each other. So that would be one thing I'm probably the most proud about. And then, not to steal a quote from our friend Lister, but when you start with the end in mind, it's a much better thing for everyone. And so it's one of those, like, while I integrated a CRM and an OMS at Kijiji, as soon as I popped over to the buy side at this former Retail Media Network that I was in, I almost immediately recognized that was an opportunity to streamline some of the processes and workflows. And so, having now been part of a couple of integrations and slash migrations of an order management system slash CRM, I'd say, again, underpinning the operations flow, I can't emphasize enough how important that is. And if you can make their lives easier and make it more efficient, that's really going to set that business up for success. Whether it's you're driving media sales, you're executing on media buying, whatever it is, if you can automate some of those steps in the process and give your teams time back to do what they do best, I think that's going to be good for everyone. So our engagement and kind of where you and I have worked together now has been in both of those projects, those two separate places. And it's one of those things where I think if you're not thinking about this at this point, you should be. And I know there's a lot of work being done globally with a lot of different folks, but it's like you need to start with that operations platform to be able to do anything in this space. And by the way, this space, I mean media and digital media specifically. It's like, start with that, and you will see a lot of success. And I think, good question. I think you also touched on this prior as well. It's just you can't have a bunch of people doing manual things, entering information into manual spreadsheets or maintaining docs somewhere where each team is responsible for their own thing. So first and foremost, and I don't think this is a surprise to anyone, but you need to have some automation in the process, in the workflows, whether that's your selling media or if you're buying media. The only way to accelerate without adding a lot more people and a lot more manual steps is some automation of some kind. And really that stems from, where you're organizing your campaigns for example, in the OMS or CRM, as we mentioned before, but it's got to exist somewhere centrally where a bunch of teams then can work from, not have to deal with entering into and all that fun stuff. So first and foremost, I would suggest and really recommend to publishers, retail media, whomever it is, get your systems in order, and then build from there. And whether it's setting some automation so that folks don't have to enter manual information, or just reduce the number of steps generally in the flows. That's the only way that they're going to be able to take kind of what they can do today and really increase it, expand it, or as you mentioned, accelerate it. I think one is a lot has moved to digital, or has not fully migrated, but has certainly become enabled by digital means. So if you think about traditional media in that sense, you're out of home. It's for retail media might be considered in-store. even, I mean, on the obviously the physical newspaper front, a lot of it has gone online. And so the rapid rise of retail, I think a lot of these folks who may have used or leveraged the traditional media in a sense prior are now realizing that the digital enablement of some of these channels has come a long way. And just speaking from experience too, I mean, we ran in-store media where we had digital screens and digital audio all kind of running through a single platform. Obviously, that helps when you're enabling the selling of media on those properties, as quickly as you can. But you've also seen this everywhere else. Digital out of home in general has really picked up steam. And as a media buyer, we were leveraging digital out of home in proximity to physical retail stores, and then enabling the in-store screens to accompany that. So it's now this kind of broader enablement story when the digital kind of elements are in play. And also for a single campaign, you can now run all of these kind of cross-device, cross-channel elements, and still report on a single campaign or a single brand. And so there's so many upsides to it from what I've seen. But yeah, lots has changed, and obviously going digital is kind of the way it's been, the way it's going. Importantly, and again, there will be a common theme throughout our chat today. I think they really need to embrace and support the operations side, right? One of the largest growth challenges that I've seen, especially coming to the buy side in retail media, is that they're all starting to run instead of the walk crawl phases of kind of rollout. And so you go from doing no media to now expecting to be the leader in media, when there's been so many other players who've been doing it forever, whether it's publishers, agencies, platforms, you name it. And so the importance of having that operational flow, the operations team set up to be able to just do what they need to do, which is deliver, whether that's, making money or spending money on either side. And so at least with ProOps, at the very least, one of the things that we're trying to help with, and whether that's through an advisement situation or consulting, is where do you start, right? You want to go from 0 to 100. Where do you start? And laying that foundation on the operations side is going to be so important for that growth later on. But also it helps organize everyone, right? It keeps the sales team kind of organized and in the know. It keeps your finance team happy to a degree, as much as possible, when you're providing them accurate information to invoice clients, or whether that's accounts receivable or accounts payable. And so I think that is kind of what I would highlight here, is just the fact that you've got to get the operations right, or at the very least, you've got to add the operations team to the table when you're building out that strategy or you're planning on what you're going to do next. And I will say that I've been fortunate enough to be at that table in a number of places, and you just can't expect growth and acceleration in media, especially digital media, without that mindset, without that person at the table to be like, okay, great that you want to do X, Y, and Z. How do we do it? What do we do to do it? And so the folks who are actually getting it done need to be there and support that strategy and that growth. So that's where I would say it. Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned this a number of times as well, but yeah, generally you start with the spreadsheets and or whatever tools you have kind of at hand that can centralize that information. So if you're a sales rep and you want to get an insertion order out to a client, right? If you're selling media, you need to start somewhere. I got to generate an IO to send to a client. So generally speaking, if you're doing that in Excel, or if every sales rep is doing that through a Word document on their own, right away the process is going to be messy if that's how you're starting. Everyone's got their own documentation. It's not centrally located. It's it's kind of all over the map. So I think if we get if we get out of that state for 1 second, it's just, hey, we need to organize our information. We need it to be in a central location so that the format's the same, right? So your naming conventions and kind of like all of the structure that would exist in a setup like that, it's got to live somewhere. And I think if you can all agree on where it lives, and again, CRM and OMS would be like the best place to start, because it is a tool built for that. But that is the starting point for any campaign flow. And that's, again, media buying or media selling. What that then enables is all of the downstream positive impacts. So all the information lives in one place. Now what you can do is you can send that information to the teams that require it, whether that's the ad operations team, media buying team, client services, account management team, to then add their bits along the way to the point where now you're delivering a campaign, and it's great. You can do what you need to do to deliver that campaign. But then ultimately, as I mentioned before, the finance team also needs to be part of that conversation, certainly a business stakeholder in the mix. And so ultimately that information has to go back somewhere. And if you don't have a centrally located starting point, it's going to be very difficult to get that information back so that the business can do what it needs to do, which is, book dollars in and dollars out in a kind of clean, efficient manner. So like generally it's starting from spreadsheets, but I would best advise anyone to consider a much more organized, clean approach to that. And that's going to save you a bunch of time and headaches later on. Yeah. Obviously, thinking back to the two most recent examples, I would say the number one, not pitfall, but the number one challenge to overcome here are the existing business rules before that platform existed. So in a lot of ways, those can get in your way. And what I mean by that is, and it could be anything. It could be how you're selling the media or how you're booking the media that you're selling to clients. It could be the cost type. It could be, the business approval flows. It could be any number of things. But existing business rules tend to create a challenge when you're trying to take a square peg and put it in a round hole that is a CRM or OMS, because a lot of these tools are built for a much broader set of clients. So, a lot of the OMSs today will try to satisfy the publisher use case, the agency use case, and the brand direct or retail use case. And so there's going to be a bunch of customizations that you want to do to satisfy your existing business processes. And, if I would kind of shout from the mountaintop to anyone listening at this point, is reconsider those business rules, those business practices as you're implementing the CRM/OMS. Does it need to be one for one? Are there adjustments? Can you be more flexible in those business rules or those business flows to leverage what exists in the CRM and OMS? Do you really need all of those customizations to satisfy something you've just always done? And if your team or any of the business stakeholders during that project are coming to you and say, this is how it's always been done, please question it. First, stop right there. Everyone pause, question that statement, because the short answer is it may not need to go that way. It may not need to be done that way. There could be a better way to do it, a more efficient way to do it. And that's what these platforms offer, is like you're starting from scratch. So think about it in those terms, right? And that is like you've got a blank page to build the processes and workflows that will work for the business, but also enable you for that growth and acceleration that we talked about earlier. So please avoid that mistake. And I've unfortunately been a part of that in two different worlds, publisher and retail media. Ultimately, though, like anything, like any project, especially integrating one of these platforms, you'll get to a good place where the business stakeholders are happy, the businesses can move on. And the last bit that I'll just kind of state for everyone here is, once you're up and running, this is not a set it and forget it. This is a living, breathing part of your business once you have this implemented. So you will constantly make changes. Things will evolve over time. And so don't fall into the trap of finding resources to finish the project, to do the integration, and then walk away. Because too often you'll strive for an MVP to get this thing live and out the door. But again, it's a living, breathing thing. It's now a part of how your teams and how your systems will operate moving forward. And so treat it as such, right? Add to it, evolve it, make changes to it. Because I can't tell you the number of times I've heard someone say, "Well, we already did the work. We don't need to spend any time on it." Well, no, it's unfortunately this industry doesn't sit back and wait. It's constantly changing and moving. So I think it's important to realize that and then plan for that in the early stages, that this is not a one-time thing. It's not a one little project. It's going to be one large project followed by a whole bunch of small projects. Does that make sense? I mean, in short, a lot more automation. And you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We spoke about the automation in some of the like pre-sales and the organization of information flows, right, within CRM, OMS. AI is then going to, I think, positively impact then on the platform side, on where you're actually running these campaigns, and whether that's you now have an ad operations person or a special media buyer, whatever it is, now entering goals and prompts to help better deliver those campaigns, to better achieve the goals. It's going to be there as a supporting function in a lot of cases. Now we have seen a lot of platforms really start to go down this route, which is enabling some AI features, and whether that's quick answers or helping to automate campaign allocation or objective optimization, whatever it is. But that's really where I see probably the biggest impact as a positive. And then I would say that if we think about the challenge with that, it's really around, is too much automation a good thing? As someone who still has a VCR and a CD player in his Jeep Wrangler, there's something to be said for some manual inputs and things and being able to hit the play button versus the machine kind of making those decisions constantly, or making more of those decisions. So I think there's still a role to play for the folks who are running the campaigns to enable the system to do what it needs to do best, whatever that looks like, whether that's again prompts or just like better communication in terms of goals and things like that. So it'll be an interesting next couple of years, to say the least, because I think this is really going to start real quick. We've already seen announcements all over LinkedIn recently where folks are trying to take the entire ad ops function and automate it. Platforms are starting to enable AI in a lot of different ways. So it's only going to accelerate from here. Like, as we've seen with retail media, I think AI in the digital media buying, selling space is going to be an absolute rocket ship over the next little while. I'd say we're, in a lot of discussions that are being had right now across this space. The idea that there's going to be more walled gardens is a tough one to manage if you're a brand or an agency, and now you're having to deal with not just a handful of walled gardens, but like a proliferation of walled gardens across every retailer and every market all over the place. So I gotta think that there's going to be some consolidation, or there's going to be platforms that kind of rise to the occasion to help connect those walled gardens to single places, so that multiple buyers and brands can in one place buy against all of the inventory to get in front of their customers and especially retailer customers. So that would be one. The other one is operations teams. If anything, the operations world in digital media is going to grow, because now you're not going to just have ad ops folks at the publisher level. You're not going to have just media buyers at an agency. Brands are going to start building teams, and we've already seen some in-house examples. But that's going to increase. Agencies might absolutely get bigger on their operations side versus strategy or planning side. And publishers will have to decide, like, how much do you want to support, whether you're a publisher or retail, how much do you want to support a managed service versus a self-serve? So somewhere in the flow of dollars being spent, there's going to be an operations person. And so if you're thinking about building a media team, please, start with the end in mind, as Mr. Lister said many times. Make sure you've got the operations folks in the right place, helping to guide those decisions. So that's number 2. Number 3, I would say, is going to be just this idea that, like, reporting is now going to become more standardized, because in retail media, if you're a retailer right now, it is a bit of a wild west in terms of how things are defined, right? If you think about, like, the core benefits of retail media networks, which is return on ad spend, right, incremental sales, etc. And there's a big push with this already in the space. So at the very least, I'm not touting anything new here. It's just I'm emphasizing the fact that, yeah, we need more standardization for sure, in order for those previous 2 points to really come into play here. Because if everyone's defining something differently, like we had with viewability a number of years ago, it's going to make for a really interesting awakening once standardization happens and you realize that, oh wait, I didn't make as much sales as I thought I was on this retailer or whatever it is. So yeah, standardization, more ops, and beware the new walled garden. So some centralization. Sales and strategy will be the highlight on those slides when you're a retailer convincing the board to build a media division. But please don't forget the operations function, the folks who are actually going to do the work. That is massively important, and I don't think I could again understate the fact that you don't have people who know how to get things done. It's going to be a very difficult climb when you're trying to reach the acceleration that you're after. Never stop learning, and maybe that's not something I spent as much time thinking about, but something I pride myself on at least reinforcing with the folks that I work with and support. Because if you're, as you said earlier, if you're sitting back and you're waiting for something to happen, the industry's already passed you. It's already moved on. And so, as a young ad ops specialist, ad trafficker, I would say learn those platforms really well and make sure that you understand the end-to-end flows. It's not going to be good enough if you just know how to run a campaign on Meta or just run a campaign on YouTube. Understand the sales process. Understand what the stakeholders need. And don't forget about the finance team. They're a pretty important part.